Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, American Comics, starting with cloning 100,000 lickers. Chapter 21. Lin Yu's idea is very simple. That is, get the blood of Thor and Barton as soon as possible, and then come back early. Definitely, Thor's genes are the most important. Barton, just passing by. In fact, there is an easier way to get Thor's genes. Because the current Thor has no divine power at all, if he controls these lickers and pounces on them, there is a high probability that Thor will be torn into pieces directly. But Lin Yu cannot do this. Now that my strength is not strong enough, if I kill Thor rashly, I'm afraid I will face Odin's wrath. Although Odin exiled Thor to Earth, he did not abandon his son. On the contrary, Odin is just training Thor's kingly heart. Although Odin's strength has declined significantly during this period, it is still not something Lin Yu's umbrella company can deal with. Therefore, Lin Yu came up with such an idea. Just drawing a tube of blood won't do any harm to Thor, so Odin won't think about him, right? Probably not, Lin Yu thought to himself. But Lin Yu still understands the principle of late change. It's useless to say more. The best way is to get Thor's genes as soon as possible. Lin Yu's eyes suddenly showed a hint of fierceness. At this time, several armored lickers suddenly walked out of the encirclement. Then, he accelerated instantly and pounced on the shield agents behind Phil Coulson. This scene immediately frightened the agents. It seemed like my commander was having a good chat with the other party just now. Why did he suddenly get angry? The agents had no hesitation, so they hurriedly raised their weapons, aimed at the armored lickers that rushed towards them, and started attacking crazily. Bang, 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 countless bullets hit those lickers. But what makes the agents despair is that this bullet is like scratching an itch on these monsters and has no effect at all. Even the opponent's speed was not affected at all. Phil Coulson in front was also shocked. He hurriedly shouted to the armored licker with a communicator in front of him, "Stop, what do you want to do? Don't be impulsive." But as soon as he finished speaking, the lickers had already rushed to the agents. The bloody mouth opened instantly. Those agents were so frightened that some of their bodies refused to obey their orders. In addition, after the first generation lickers evolved into armored lickers, their strength and speed increased a lot. They had no time to make any defensive moves before they were licked. The eater fell to the ground. Wails came from the mouths of the shield agents. Then, it stopped abruptly. A total of 5 agents were swallowed up by the lickers in an instant. Although lickers appear to be about twice the size of a human body, when they open their mouths, they can even stuff an adult human directly into them. On the field, after devouring the 5 agents, the armored lickers finally retreated slowly. It seems that they have no interest in other agents. The remaining agents were all terrified. A few even peed their pants. Definitely, you can't blame them for being timid. But the scene just now, where a living companion was eaten by a monster in front of him, was really terrifying to the extreme. In the encirclement, calm was restored again. Only the blood on the ground seemed to still be a warning of the tragic scene that had just happened. And at the moment, Phil Coulson turned pale and turned to look at the monster with the camera in front of him again. Phil Coulson said angrily again, "Who are you and what do you want to do?" Those agents who died were all his companions who had worked together before. He was quite angry at the moment. At the same time, I felt a little powerless. Because he felt that he could do nothing and could not save his companions. At this time, Lin Yu's voice came again from the communicator. "It was you who killed them. If you do what I say, nothing will happen to anyone." Lin Yu's words caused cold sweat to break out on Phil Coulson's forehead. The other party acted too decisively. Moreover, Phil Coulson suddenly felt that what the other party said seemed to be true. It was me who killed those agents. But at this moment, without giving Phil Coulson any chance to think or speak, Lin Yu continued, "Now, give you 3 seconds to follow my order just now. If you can't do such a simple thing well, you will do it again." Lost 5 companions. Lin Yu's words seemed cold and unusual after the voice changed through the transmitter. Phil Coulson felt that the other party was simply a devil. A demon even more evil than the monsters you see before you. But there was nothing he could do. As soon as Lin Yu finished speaking, he hurriedly took 2 steps forward and came to the side of the armored licker in front of him. Suppressing the fear in his heart, he opened the small box on the back of the armored liquor and took out 2 syringes. After experiencing the incident just now, Phil Coulson did not dare to have any hesitation at all. He took the syringe and came to Barton first. Barton saw everything that happened just now, and he heard Lin Yu's words clearly. When the armored liquors rushed up, he also attacked with bows and arrows, but it had no effect at all. Moreover, at such a close distance, he did not dare to use arrows with bombs, which might blow up himself and the agents around him. Barton also watched helplessly as his companions were torn into pieces and swallowed into the stomachs of the monsters. At the moment, seeing Phil Coulson coming to him with a syringe, he didn't show any hesitation at all and just rolled up his sleeves. Now, even if there was poison on the syringe and it would kill him immediately if it was pierced into his arm, he would have no choice but to bite the bullet. It was impossible for him to watch his companions being killed by those monsters. Phil Coulson and Barton looked at each other. Phil Coulson saw determination in Barton's eyes, and Barton saw intolerance in Phil Coulson's eyes. Phil Coulson was also afraid that there might be something fishy about this syringe. However, he had no choice. Barton met Phil Coulson's eyes and nodded slightly. Then, he grabbed the syringe from Phil Coulson's hand and plunged it directly into his arm. After a few seconds, a tube of bright red blood had already been drawn out. After handing the syringe filled with blood to Phil Coulson, Barton gave Phil Coulson a reassuring look. It seems that there is no problem with this syringe. Phil Coulson finally felt relieved. Then, he turned around, slowly walked towards Thor, who was still squatting on the ground with an expressionless face. The blood draw went smoothly. At the moment, Thor, as if he had lost his soul, completely ignored Phil Coulson's behavior. If Thor's magical power was still there, the needle would probably not be able to penetrate his skin. But now, he is just no different from an ordinary person. Phil Coulson easily drew a large tube of blood from his arm. Then, Phil Coulson slowly came to the armored liquor again and put 2 syringes filled with blood into the original box. But, after Phil Coulson put the 2 tubes of blood in, the armored liquor didn't leave in a hurry. Under the puzzled looks of Phil Coulson, Barton and others, the armored liquor carrying a box and a communicator slowly walked to the stout man who had just had his blood drawn. The man's voice sounded again in the communicator. I never thought that Thor, the god of thunder, would fall to this level. As soon as Lin Yu finished speaking, Thor, who had been extremely depressed, immediately regained his energy and looked at the ugly monster next to him in surprise. His heart was filled with shock. Is there anyone on Earth who actually knows his name? Thor was certain that this was his first time on Earth. So, how does the other party know about him? But Thor's appearance when facing the armored liquor is completely different from that of Earthlings like Phil Coulson. He had absolutely no fear of the terrifying appearance of the armored liquor. After all, he has seen many monsters uglier than liquors. Who are you and why do you know my identity? Thor asked coldly. It doesn't matter who I am. What's important is that if you want to get your power back, you can't do it in this decadent state. Lin Yu's voice came out from the communicator again. After hearing these words, Thor's face became even more shocked. The other party not only knew his identity, but also knew that he had lost his divine power. Only Asgardians know about this. Who is the other party, and why is he so powerful? Who are you? What's your purpose? Thor asked again. At the moment, he had slowly stood up from the ground, looking down at the armored liquor who was on all fours. However, Lin Yu did not answer Thor's question. His purpose in talking to Thor was not to reveal his identity. Sooner or later, the other party will know your identity, even S.H.I.E.L.D. But, not now. My identity is not important. You will know it sooner or later. I just want to remind you that if you want to get your divine power back, you need to consider how to become a true king. As a true king, not only it can be done with brute force. Lin Yu said slowly through the communicator. Then, before Thor could speak, the armored liquor was under the control of Lin Yu and returned to the main force. The army of 20,000 armored liquors turned around and galloped away. Only a layer of dust was left. The departure of the armored liquor army did not attract Thor's attention. At the moment, Thor stood there blankly, seemingly lost in thought. The expression on his face was no longer the decadent look it had before. And not far next to Thor, Phil Coulson and Barton, as well as a dozen SHIELD agents, were all stunned. They all felt that their heads seemed to be a little hard to turn around. Why did that guy's conversation just now feel a little weird? The guy who controls these monsters actually calls that stupid strong man the god of thunder. Thor, doesn't it sound like a character from a myth? Moreover, that guy even admitted it. After thinking for a while, Phil Coulson suddenly frowned, feeling more and more that the problem was serious. It would be fine to say that the guy in front of me is mentally ill, but the guy controlling these monsters behind the scenes is definitely not a fool. So, here comes the problem. Who is this sturdy bear-like guy? Phil Coulson turned around and looked at Barton, who was covering the pinprick on his arm. Both of them saw a hint of solemnity in the other's eyes. It seems that director Nick Fury needs to be informed as soon as possible about what happened here. Whether it's the reappearance of the armored licker or this suspected alien, it's no small matter. And, through today's events, Phil Coulson also vaguely understood the purpose of the controller behind the scenes. After all, there are really not many places where blood can be used. The Umbrella Company's underground base in Raccoon City, in the Hive's secret base. Lin Yu gently pressed the switch on the screen in front of him and turned back to his sofa. Those words just now were just temporary thoughts. Lin Yu knew that Odin was watching everything he did. Although Odin seems to have some physical problems now, his strength is still not to be underestimated. Moreover, for Lin Yu, who is familiar with various Marvel characters, he also knows Odin's ability quite well. Odin is able to perceive his son's state with his powerful divine power. In other words, Odin definitely saw himself drawing a tube of Thor's blood, and naturally heard his conversation with Thor. This is a maze laid out by Lin Yu. In other words, an olive branch to Odin and Thor. When Thor regains his divine power, he will definitely remember the words he once said. When the time comes, let's not say whether Thor will be grateful to him, but at least he won't be hostile to him. This is Lin Yu's true purpose. Half an hour later. Finally, Lin Yu's office door was knocked again. Alice, holding 2 test tubes in her hand, came to Lin Yu. Seeing Alice and what she was holding, Lin Yu stood up excitedly. After obtaining the biochemical technology tree system, I have obtained genes twice that can provide experience points to the biochemical technology tree. The first time was the gene of hatred, which provided 300 experience points. The second time was Rumlow, only 30 points. But the combined genes of these two guys are completely incomparable to Thor's genes. Thor, after all, is an orthodox Aesir god, and he is also the son of the God King, a strong man with the power of thunder. However, what Lin Yu didn't expect was that even though he had already underestimated the strength of the Thor gene, he was still a little surprised when he saw the prompt given by the system. Gene name: Aesir powerful gene Thor Odin. Gene strength: 4 stars. Available experience points: 600 points. Gene contains ability distribution: Strength 100, Agility 50, Intelligence 10, Attack 80, Defense 100, Attribute Thunder 260 inches. Lin Yu was simply stunned when he saw this attribute. Thor's genetic strength reached 4 stars. The most important thing is the experience value he can provide, which is as high as 600 points. Moreover, in the ability distribution, the lightning attribute actually accounts for nearly half. In other words, nearly half of Thor's strength is brought to him by the power of thunder. Without the power of thunder, his strength is at most a little stronger than Abomination. This attribute makes Lin Yu quite excited. If this is integrated into one's own biochemical technology tree, wouldn't it mean that one's armored lickers would also have the power of thunder? In addition, is it possible that I will also have the power of thunder? Lin Yu felt extremely excited just thinking about it. Immediately afterwards, Lin Yu looked at the other test tube again. In that test tube was Barton's gene. Compared to Thor, Barton's genes are much weaker. Although he is also a member of the Avengers, Barton's body is slightly stronger than ordinary people. At most, it's as good as Rumlow. However, what slightly surprised Lin Yu was that Barton's ability was extremely unevenly distributed. Gene name: Humanity's strongest archer gene, Hawkeye Barton. Gene strength: 1 star. Experience points available: 50 points. Gene contains ability distribution: Agility 10, Special Accuracy 40 inches. Among Barton's abilities, except for a little agility, all other abilities are concentrated on the special branch. Moreover, it is all about his archery skills. In other words, apart from archery, Barton's other abilities are average. 10 points of agility is enough to beat a few ordinary people. However, with the bow and arrow, he is much stronger than Rumlow. Lin Yu took the 2 test tubes and then glanced at Alice. Alice understood and immediately turned around and left Lin Yu's room. She is very smart and never asks questions that she shouldn't. And these are Lin Yu's deepest secrets, and naturally they won't be known to anyone. After Alice left, the 2 test tubes in Lin Yu's hands flashed at the same time. Then, the biotechnology tree in Lin Yu's mind suddenly burst out with a violent blue light. The experience value of the biochemical technology tree's trunk soared instantly, reaching 980 points. There is only 20 points left before the trunk can advance to level 2. In addition to the main trunk, the experience values of the 8 branches have also changed. Especially the attribute branch, which was directly increased from 0 points to 260 points. At the moment, Lin Yu suddenly felt that his body had begun to undergo drastic changes. Compared with when absorbing the hate gene, the change is more intense. Strength is growing rapidly. The body is becoming stronger. Gently clenching his fist, Lin Yu even felt that he could blow away a cow with one punch. No, a cow is nothing. Even if hatred is standing in front of him, he can easily knock it away with one punch. This is the self-confidence brought by one's own strong strength. But this is nothing. When a flash of lightning began to appear on Lin Yu's clenched fist, Lin Yu almost jumped with excitement. Thunder. He actually possesses the power of thunder. Lin Yu closed his eyes gently, and suddenly, his body glowed with silver light. Countless thunderbolts appeared on Lin Yu's body, like a god coming to the world. Those thunderbolts, in Lin Yu's conscious perception, are like his closest friends, extremely kind. Lin Yu waved his hand gently, and a bolt of lightning flew out of his hand and hit the wall of his office directly. Then, there was a violent, click, sound. There was a scorched mark on the wall. The power of this lightning is quite good. Lin Yu opened his eyes, and both of his eyeballs turned bright silver, and there seemed to be endless lightning rolling in them. Slowly, the power of thunder in Lin Yu gradually dissipated. But, Lin Yu's mood could not calm down for a long time. If Lin Yu was still a little worried when he just traveled to this Marvel world, now, Lin Yu no longer has any fear. The biochemical technology tree system is still at level 1, but it already possesses such powerful power. If the biochemical technology tree continues to upgrade to level 2, or even level 3 or 4, how powerful will it be? Not to mention, the backbone of the biochemical technology tree is not just 3 or 4 levels. At this moment, after Lin Yu felt the power in his body, he looked at his system cultivation tank. At the moment, the armored liquor, which was sleeping quietly in the cultivation tank, also underwent huge amounts of changes. With a flash of blue light, Lin Yu summoned the armored liquor in front of him. The image of the armored liquor has changed a lot. Among them, the biggest change was the appearance of some silver patterns on his body. Those patterns were like tattoos, imprinted on his flesh and bone armor. And, on those patterns, there were faint flashes of thunder. It seems that its body is filled with the power of lightning. In addition to these, tiny thunders flashed on its 4 claws. It is not yet known what kind of abilities these thunders have given to this liquor, but just by looking at it, Lin Yu knew that the strength of these liquors must have undergone earth-shaking changes. Perhaps, they should be given another name. Lin Yu thought about it and came up with a new name. Thunder Liquor. Just call it the Thunder Liquor. Lin Yu waved his hand and the thunder liquor on the ground was taken back. Opening the door, Lin Yu walked towards the cloning laboratory. Now that the liquor has evolved again, clone it again into the Thunder Liquor Legion. At the same time, just when Lin Yu had just obtained Thor's genes and was excitedly preparing to reclone the evolved Thunder Liquor, Phil Coulson and Barton Agent, with a dozen frustrated S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, returned to the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters building. They brought Thor back with them. But, Thor is no longer so decadent now. It seemed that after listening to what Lin Yu said before, he figured out some problems. And following Phil Coulson and the others back is just because he has nowhere to go now. After settling Thor for a while, Phil Coulson and Barton hurried to the office of S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Nick Fury. They must report this action to Nick Fury as soon as possible. Director. Just as Phil Coulson started, Nick Fury interrupted his report. Then, Nick Fury slowly walked to the door of his office, opened the door and looked outside for a few times, and then closed the door tightly. After doing these things, Nick Fury turned his attention to his two favorites again. Sit down and talk about your findings. Nick Fury's face seemed a little uncomfortable. Nick Fury actually had a rough idea of what happened through satellite surveillance and the communication equipment carried by Phil Coulson and others. After all, Lin Yu didn't block the signal there this time. In that small town, the umbrella company had no way of blocking the signal. If a mosquito meat gene were used, Lin Yu might consider the risk of exposure. However, Thor's genes are really important. So, despite not blocking the signal, Lin Yu sent out an army of armored lickers. After the three sat down, Phil Coulson began to report. He just mentioned some things casually. After all, the director already knew a lot of things. But, some details, as well as his own guesses, require Phil Coulson to explain carefully. Those monsters seem to have changed a lot compared to when they were in New York. It seems that their attack capabilities have improved a lot. From the voice of the person behind the scenes, it sounds like he is not very old, but I don't know if he is disguised. According to my judgment, that guy's purpose should be the blood. This time it doesn't look like a maze, so to investigate his identity, I think I should try it with these blood. When the voice said the words, God of Thunder, the guy obviously showed a natural surprise. Either he has a mental problem, or he is really the so-called God of Thunder. I guess there are spies inside our S.H.I.E.L.D. Every sentence Phil Coulson said was very logical and explained. In this regard, Nick Fury nodded frequently. He and Phil Coulson basically have the same view. But, Nick Fury is more concerned about the last question Phil Coulson said than the so-called God of Thunder. He actually felt that there were spies inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Otherwise, he would not have gone to the door to take a look before talking to the two of them. Ever since Rumlow and the SWAT team disappeared, he had a vague feeling that something was wrong. Nick Fury was obviously alert early on. Half an hour later, after communicating with Phil Coulson and Barton, Nick Fury once again confirmed several things. In his mind, some clues gradually became clear. Subsequently, Nick Fury ordered, Barton, take charge of the matter of the God of Thunder, and find out whether he is insane or not. Okay, Director, Barton responded. At this time, Nick Fury turned his attention to Phil Coulson, the agent who followed him for the first time. Phil Coulson's mind is still quite clear. Phil Coulson, please wait for my order and accompany me to visit someone. Nick Fury said to Phil Coulson. He thought of a person when some monsters appeared in New York a few days ago. But in the past few days, too many surprises had occurred, so the idea of visiting that person was shelved. But now, he felt that he had to make a trip himself. Just when Nick Fury took Phil Coulson, the two drove to Raccoon City, ready to talk to the boss of the umbrella company. Lin Yu is having a meeting in the umbrella company's above-ground headquarters building. This meeting is the half-year summary meeting of the umbrella company. Although it sounds large, in reality only a few senior executives from Umbrella Corporation participated. Lin Yu also rarely attends meetings with a large number of people, so most ordinary employees of umbrella companies don't even know of Lin Yu's existence. At the moment, in the small conference room on the top floor of the umbrella company's above-ground headquarters building, Lin Yu sat at the top, and behind him, Alice stood there quietly. There were 7 or 8 people sitting on the conference table. These people are the core management of the umbrella company. It is these people who control all the business of the umbrella company around the world. This meeting, which only happens once every 6 months, is actually a meeting where these people report their work to Lin Yu, the big boss behind the scenes. These people have a very high status in society. But, here, in this small conference room, they all looked flattering, like waiters in a hotel. Everyone in the outside world thought they were the owners of the umbrella company, but only themselves and Lin Yu knew that they were just Lin Yu's minions. In the entire umbrella company, only Lin Yu is the real boss. The chairman and general manager are all fake. It is just used to hide the identity of Lin Yu, the big boss behind the scenes. In the United States, as long as you have money, you can fake any business license or legal person. Definitely, they indeed determine many of the development directions of umbrella companies. However, the real big things are decided by the big boss Lin Yu. But, at the moment, Lin Yu sat in his chair and almost fell asleep listening to these people's reports. Analyzing those messy data is really not Lin Yu's strong point. Definitely, even though Lin Yu seemed to be dozing off, those guys were still working hard to report their results in the past 6 months. Because they knew that even if Lin Yu didn't listen, Alice behind him would. Alice is the most effective assistant to the big boss Lin Yu. But, a few minutes later, just as a guy was reporting on the equity interests of other companies acquired by the umbrella company, Lin Yu suddenly opened his eyes. "What did you say? Say it again," Lin Yu said softly. The guy who was reporting was shocked, and his face immediately showed a nervous look. He thought he had done something wrong. However, he still sorted out his thoughts and re-reported the report. "Boss, we acquired 10% of Stark Industries shares 2 months ago. Now Stark Industries stock price has risen by 30%, and the momentum is very good. It is said that Stark Industries has successfully developed many new weapons recently, and their CEO Tony Stark went to the Middle East yesterday to promote their new weapons to the military. It is expected that there will be many big orders this time. It is expected that Stark Industries' stock price will increase by at least 10 percentage points." The guy continued to report. However, Lin Yu didn't listen to what happened next. "Unexpectedly, I am still a shareholder of Stark Industries. Moreover, Tony Stark actually went to the Middle East. Doesn't this mean that Iron Man is about to be born?" Lin Yu fell into deep thought. Tony Stark, in the entire Marvel world, can be regarded as the protagonist among the protagonists. Although he is just an ordinary person, his strength is not weak. Now that he knows that he will be in trouble, can he get some benefits from it? Although his biochemical technology tree system is quite powerful, Lin Yu doesn't mind getting some benefits from other places. After all, I am a time traveler, and it is really unreasonable not to gain some benefits by being familiar with the plot. Lin Yu squinted his eyes and tapped the table lightly with one finger. The guy who was still reporting quickly stopped. In the conference room, everyone looked nervously at Lin Yu, who was sitting at the top, waiting for the big boss to speak. At this moment, Lin Yu suddenly raised his head, showed a smile, and said lightly, "Continue to increase the shareholding ratio of Stark Industries. It doesn't matter if you spend more money. If money can't solve the problem, then use other methods." Lin Yu's words were not loud, but everyone could hear the hidden meaning in his words. Is it possible that the boss wants to enter the military industry? The military industry is completely different from the industries that umbrella companies are involved in today. But none of them dared to raise any objections. After all, in the umbrella company, everything is what one says. Upon hearing Lin Yu's order, everyone hurriedly responded, "Yes, boss." The meeting continues. But, not long after, Alice suddenly leaned over and whispered a few words into Lin Yu's ear. Lin Yu suddenly frowned after hearing these words. "Let's end the meeting here first. Go and do your work. Remember to communicate with Alice in time if you need anything." Lin Yu stood up and interrupted his subordinate's report. Everyone left one after another. Lin Yu and Alice were the only 2 people left in the room. At this moment, Lin Yu asked, "How many people are here?" Alice replied, "There are 2 in total, one is S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Nick Fury, and the other is S.H.I.E.L.D. high-level agent Phil Coulson. They named you and asked to see you." Lin Yu's frown deepened. Unexpectedly, Nick Fury actually came to the door in person. You don't need to think about it to know that he must have guessed something. But, after thinking about it, Lin Yu felt relieved. So what if you know? I'm not afraid of S.H.I.E.L.D. Instead, S.H.I.E.L.D. should fear itself. Lin Yu stood up and ordered to Alice, "Arrange a satellite to keep an eye on Tony Stark's whereabouts for me. I want to know his location at all times." Behind Lin Yu, Alice was slightly startled. Some don't understand why the boss wants to pay attention to Tony Stark's whereabouts. However, she nodded. The boss has the final say over the entire umbrella company, let alone a satellite. Alice made arrangements hastily. A few minutes later, Lin Yu took Alice out of the conference room. Then, walked towards the visitor reception room below. In just a few minutes along the way, Lin Yu had already figured out how to deal with Nick Fury, an old fox. At the moment, in a guest reception room on the 28th floor of the Umbrella Company headquarters building, Nick Fury and Phil Coulson were both sitting quietly on the sofa, silent. It seemed that they were thinking about how to talk to the boss of the Umbrella Company for a while. Before coming, Nick Fury had briefly discussed his speculations with Phil Coulson, such as who the monsters belonged to, and who the real boss of the Umbrella Company was. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he still knows something about Lin Yu's identity. He also knew that the entire Umbrella Company was not as simple as it seemed. Nick Fury once secretly investigated the Umbrella Company and knew that the Umbrella Company seemed to have a lot of secret research, but what it was exactly was unknown. After all, except for Lin Yu and Alice, who can enter and exit the hive at will, no one else can enter at will. Even if you get in, it will be difficult to get out again. Therefore, all the agents sent by Nick Fury back then were blocked. However, this also gave Nick Fury a rough idea of some of the Umbrella Company's secrets. But this time, through these monster incidents, he has vaguely locked onto the Umbrella Company. After all, the Umbrella Company is probably the only company in the world that can use blood for cloning experiments. Other organizations either don't have the financial resources or the technology. However, even if he vaguely knew something, he did not dare to investigate the Umbrella Company anymore. After all, there is still no news about Rumlow and the special team. It is estimated that the possibility of the entire army being annihilated is very high. A few minutes later, the door to the reception room was finally pushed open. A bald young man, followed by a blonde woman, walked in. As soon as he entered the door, the bald young man greeted him with a smile in his hand. It turns out that S.H.I.E.L.D. director is here. What an honor. Lin Yu directly grabbed Nick Fury's hand and shook it vigorously a few times. Nick Fury also forced a smile on his face and said, "I didn't expect that the real boss behind the Umbrella Company would be so young." He has really never met Lin Yu. Moreover, I never expected that the big boss of the Umbrella Company would be a bald head like myself. It feels a little funny. The two let go of their hands and sat on the sofa respectively. Nick Fury said casually, "I really didn't expect that you could control such a huge company at such a young age." Nick Fury was telling the truth. The first time he saw Lin Yu, he was extremely surprised. Because, Lin Yu looks like he is about 30 years old at most. Definitely. In fact, Lin Yu's body is already over 40 years old. However, since Lin Yu traveled through time and obtained the biochemical technology tree system, Lin Yu's body has become younger and younger. Now, after acquiring Thor's genes, Lin Yu's appearance has directly changed to about 30 years old. I don't know if it is because people in Asgard can live longer. It seemed that Bai was almost the same age as Alice. But, Lin Yu's next words suddenly made the atmosphere in the reception room suddenly tense. Lin Yu said with a smile, "I really didn't expect that you would dare to come to my place with just an agent." Lin Yu's words instantly changed the expressions of Nick Fury and Phil Coulson next to him. This sentence is simply provocative. And, the meaning behind this sentence seems to have made it clear that Rumlow's disappearance is related to the Umbrella Company. Nick Fury instantly felt like he was being reckless. The big boss of this Umbrella Company seems to be a little lawless. It was completely different from what I imagined the big bosses behind the scenes looked like. Nick Fury said with a non-smiling smile, "Mr. Lin's joke has gone too far. You shouldn't be as experienced as a small character like us." Nick Fury had no choice but to fight Lin Yu, haha. Lin Yu, on the other hand, doesn't like chatting. In other words, there is no point in chatting with Nick Fury. Even if you want to build some relationships, you can't do it through small talk. Might as well say something practical. Lin Yu chuckled and said straight to the point, "Director Nick Fury, you're here for Rumlow's business, right?" Upon hearing this, Nick Fury and Phil Coulson stood up from the sofa. The expressions of the two of them could no longer remain calm. This sentence, what's the difference between this and directly admitting that Rumlow's disappearance was his fault? But, at this moment, Lin Yu, however, still looked calm, sitting there as steady as a rock, and even crossed his legs. Behind Lin Yu, Alice's expression did not change at all. When comparing the two sides, the gap is immediately apparent. In this verbal confrontation, Nick Fury was completely defeated. "Mr. Lin, don't make such a joke," Nick Fury said coldly. Next to Nick Fury, Phil Coulson has put his hands on his waist. The situation at the scene instantly became tense. At this time, Lin Yu said slowly again, "Director Nick Fury, I just helped you deal with a few hydras. Is it necessary to be so nervous?" New York military base. General Ross put in his office. An angry roar spread throughout the entire office area. "Trash, a bunch of trash." Dozens of elite special forces soldiers disappeared silently. General Ross was furious. He had just lost 2 elite armored units, and now another squad of soldiers was missing. To General Ross, there was no difference between missing and all killed in action. That was a group of well-armed elite warriors. If they hadn't died, they would have come back long ago. "Check for me and find out where they are. Even if they are dead, we must find their bodies." General Ross roared angrily again. In his office, 2 soldiers responded hurriedly, "Yes, General." The 2 men hurried down to arrange the investigation. But General Ross's face was still livid. He slowly walked to the window and looked into the distance. That direction is exactly where Raccoon City is. One of his men disappeared just after he went to Raccoon City. This is already obvious, but it is not that easy to move an umbrella company. However, it would be too cowardly not to fight back after letting yourself suffer such a big loss. No one in this world can let himself suffer twice in a row. Looking in the direction of Raccoon City, General Ross's eyes gradually narrowed. Nick Fury and Lin Yu chatted at the Umbrella Company headquarters for half an hour before finally walking out of the Umbrella Company with Phil Coulson. The expressions of the 2 seemed very calm. But when they got back to the car, the 2 of them breathed a long sigh of relief. During this conversation with Lin Yu, they felt that their whole bodies were tense all the time. All conversations were led by Lin Yu. The 2 of them originally went to find out about Lin Yu, the big boss of the Umbrella Company, but unexpectedly, they learned an even more terrifying secret from Lin Yu. And it was Lin Yu who took the initiative. After getting into the car, Phil Coulson sat in the driving seat, but after turning on the ignition, he did not start the car. Nick Fury did not urge him, but sat in the passenger seat with a heavy look on his face. At this time, Phil Coulson turned his stiff neck and said cautiously to Nick Fury, "Director, is what the boss of the Umbrella Company said true? Are Sidwell and Rumlow really from Hydra?" At Umbrella Company, Lin Yu told them a shocking secret. That is, there are many Hydra members lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. And Lin Yu also revealed 2 names. One Rumlow, the other Sidwell. Forget about Rumlow. Lin Yu has almost admitted that the reason why Rumlow and his special service team disappeared was because of him. But Sidwell, that's the veteran agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. In S.H.I.E.L.D., Sidwell is only 1 level below Phil Coulson and Hill. He can be considered a high-level executive of S.H.I.E.L.D. He is actually Hydra. Both Nick Fury and Phil Coulson were a little unconvinced. However, he felt that there was no need for Lin Yu to lie to him. "Is he just trying to keep us from pursuing Rumlow's case?" Phil Coulson murmured again. Nick's frown deepened. After a long time, he finally said slowly, "I don't think he needs to lie to us, because even if he admits that he killed Rumlow and everyone in the special service team, there is nothing we can do against him." Hearing Nick Fury's words, Phil Coulson also nodded slowly. Indeed, as Nick Fury said, with Lin Yu's status, it is basically impossible for S.H.I.E.L.D. to deal with him. Moreover, the most important thing is that they have no idea how much terrifying power Lin Yu controls. And he is quite familiar with S.H.I.E.L.D. At this time, Nick Fury said softly, "After you go back, don't act rashly. Investigate secretly. If he is really from Hydra, then take this opportunity to clean out all the cats and dogs in S.H.I.E.L.D. A few minutes later, Phil Coulson finally drove his car and left near the Umbrella Company headquarters building in Raccoon City. And at the moment, on the Umbrella Company headquarters building, Lin Yu was quietly looking through the window at the departure of the black off-road vehicle below. Behind Lin Yu, Alice asked softly, "Boss, are there really Hydra spies in S.H.I.E.L.D.? The organization Hydra is not well known among ordinary people in the Marvel world." However, Alice is not an ordinary person, so she still knows this name. Hearing Alice's question, Lin Yu turned around slowly and said with a smile, "Definitely, I didn't lie to them. Alice still had no doubts about Lin Yu's words. She also found it quite amazing that an organization like S.H.I.E.L.D., which specializes in cultivating agents, was actually infiltrated by other forces. It was almost like a joke. Alice's curiosity was also aroused. "Boss, is the guy named Sidwell you are talking about already at the top of S.H.I.E.L.D.?" Alice asked with interest. Hearing this question, a strange smile appeared on Lin Yu's face. This is not just a matter of Sidwell's spy. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s spies probably occupy half of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s top and bottom ranks. Moreover, even Nick Fury's boss has long been a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even Alice was shocked when she heard this. Nick Fury, S.H.I.E.L.D. director's immediate boss, is actually Hydra. What else is it called S.H.I.E.L.D.? Let's just change it to Hydra Bureau. But, boss, why didn't you tell him? Alice had a lot of doubts today. Lin Yu's patience was also very good today. If you tell him that his immediate boss is Hydra, it will not be an easy thing to accept. But with the ability of Nick Fury, an old fox, if you follow the line of Sidwell, you can probably find his immediate boss, on. Just when Lin Yu and Alice were chatting casually. In Lin Yu's mind, a system prompt suddenly sounded. The last time the system prompted, it had only been 2 or 3 days. Unexpectedly, the system discovered good genes again. Ding, the genes of 4 elites from the 9 realms have been detected in a small town in southern New York. Please go to the host to collect the genes as soon as possible to upgrade the level of the biochemical technology tree. Mosquito meat is also meat, let alone 4 mosquitoes. The moment he heard the system prompt, Lin Yu knew who the gene came from this time. 4 people, and they appeared in the place where Thor once appeared. Obviously, they were the 3 warriors of Asgard and Thor's real girlfriend, Sif. The genes of the 3 warriors of Asgard should not be too weak, not to mention there is Sif. Sif is considered an ordinary god in Asgard. Although not as perverted as Thor, he is at least much stronger than the average Asgard warrior. Hearing the news, Lin Yu suddenly became excited. The backbone of my biochemical technology tree is still 20 points short of reaching level 2. Those guys must have a lot of genes, which is more than enough to upgrade my biochemical technology tree to level 2. According to the system's explanation, every time the main character upgrades his level, he will get a new biochemical creature. At the first level, I already had such a terrifying thing as a licker, so the biochemical creature given as a gift at the second level must be stronger. Alice, I have a new job. Lin Yu smiled slightly and said to Alice. Under Lin Yu's order, 20,000 newly cloned Thunder Lickers were once again transported to the Umbrella Company's underground base in New York. The Umbrella Company's underground base in New York seems to have become a dedicated entrance and exit for the Lickers army. In this regard, Lin Yu has even decided to completely transform the New York underground base into a place dedicated to the entry and exit of his biochemical army. Sooner or later, his biochemical army will grow in number. At that time, the exit of the New York underground base will be somewhat insufficient. Therefore, preparation must be made in advance. Definitely. These tasks are an afterthought. At the moment, Lin Yu has returned to the Umbrella Company's underground hive base. Standing in front of the big screen in his office, Lin Yu arranged for Alice again, call Wesker over. Alice hurriedly took out the communicator and contacted Wesker. Wesker is also one of the top executives of Umbrella Corporation. And he is also the head of the Biological and Chemical Emergency Response Force of the Armed Forces under Lin Yu. Lin Yu was very familiar with Wesker in his previous life. He was once one of the main villains in the Resident Evil movie series. Only, in this Marvel world, Wesker, like Alice, is Lin Yu's subordinate. Loyal. After Lin Yu traveled through time, he had contact with Wesker twice, but he never arranged a job for him. Now, it's finally the turn of the Umbrella Corporation's armed forces to take action. The 3 warriors of Asgard and Sif are not difficult to deal with. However, Lin Yu felt that it would be more convenient to send his subordinates to contact them. After all, they are not from Earth, so they may not even know how to use a syringe. Therefore, we can only send Wesker to go there. In less than 2 minutes, Wesker knocked on the door and walked in. After seeing Lin Yu, he hurriedly and respectfully saluted. Boss, are you looking for me? Wesker is not tall, but he looks very strong. His hair is covered with bright hair gel, which makes him look quite capable. However, when facing Lin Yu, like other umbrella company employees, he was very respectful. After all, in this hive, Lin Yu is the boss who truly controls the power of life and death. Lin Yu still stood in front of the screen and did not look back. He seemed to be thinking about something. A few minutes later, Lin Yu finally said slowly, "Wesker, I will send you the location of the target in a moment. You lead 2 teams to draw a tube of blood from those 4 people. You can use force, but try not to let it go." They died. Hearing Lin Yu's order, Wesker was obviously happy. This guy is notoriously bellicose. When he didn't have any missions, he would stay in the hive base all day long, which would stifle him. "Yes, boss," Wesker replied excitedly. Lin Yu smiled slightly and said, "Go ahead, I will make 20,000 Thunder Lickers cooperate with you." Hearing Lin Yu's words, Wesker became even more excited. As Lin Yu's most core subordinate, he naturally knows about lickers. That is the latest research result of the umbrella company. He has long wanted to see their power with his own eyes. Wesker hurriedly followed the order and left. As for Lin Yu, the corners of her mouth were slightly raised again. There are several biggest advantages to traveling to this world by yourself. The first is its own biochemical technology tree system, which is fundamental. The second is that I am familiar with the plots and characters of the Marvel world, and I am like a prophet of this world. Third, these are my subordinates. Whether it's Alice, Isaac, or Wesker, they all have very strong abilities and are loyal to themselves. With the help of these people, I can truly hide behind the scenes and be a hands-off shopkeeper. A few minutes later, 2 helicopters took off from a base in Raccoon City of the Umbrella Company and headed towards New York. At the moment, in that small town in southern New York, Thor's best friends, the 3 Asgard warriors, and Sif were wandering aimlessly. After they were teleported to Earth, they landed in this small town. But, in this small town, there was no trace of Thor. And, the residents of those small towns seemed to be looking at me as if they were a fool, which was really rude. After wandering for a while, the 4 of them suddenly felt the sound of the earth shaking under their feet. Hogun, one of the 3 warriors of Asgard, hurriedly lay on the ground and listened with his own ears. Immediately afterwards, his expression changed drastically, and he said to his companions, "It seems like something is running over here, and there are a lot of them." At the same time, Nick Fury, who had just returned to S.H.I.E.L.D., also suddenly received the news. In that small town south of New York City, 4 weirdly dressed guys suddenly appeared. They asked people they saw if they had seen Thor in a hammer. It was almost like filming a movie. And this time, Barton also came to Nick Fury's office. His report shocked Nick Fury. From what Barton learned, it seemed that the guy they brought back might really be an alien. "Director, what should we do?" Barton asked. Nick Fury's head is a bit big now. "I had just learned that there were Hydra spies inside S.H.I.E.L.D., and then I was suddenly told that aliens had come to the Earth. It was just a mess of things coming together. Moreover, one of his most capable generals, Rumlow, is still missing, and he will probably continue to be missing, as it rains all night long." Definitely, even if Rumlow is by his side now, Nick Fury wouldn't dare to use him. Who knows if he is from Hydra? The more he thought about it, the more irritated he became. Nick Fury simply waved his hand and said, "Just watch and deal with it. If their identities are true, try to maintain a friendly relationship with them and don't be impulsive." Nick Fury is really not in the mood right now. S.H.I.E.L.D. is already in chaos, who cares about aliens? Barton was also stunned when he heard director Nick Fury say this. He still doesn't know the news Nick Fury heard from Lin Yu. However, Nick Fury was not prepared to tell him. After all, before this matter was investigated clearly, the fewer people who knew about it, the better. A small town in southern New York. A few minutes later, almost all the residents felt the slight trembling of the earth. It feels a bit like an earthquake. However, there seemed to be a herd of rhinos running around. Almost all the residents came to the outside world and looked around. Compared to those residents, the 3 warriors of Asgard seemed much more professional. Sif jumped directly onto the roof of a house. She looked in the direction of the source of the sound, and suddenly a look of shock appeared on her face. On the ground in the distance, there was a cloud of smoke and dust, and there seemed to be countless beasts running around. What shocked Sif the most was that inside the smoke and dust, she seemed to see countless thunder. Just like Thor when he unleashes his divine power. So, what exactly is it? Why do they have thunder on their bodies? And, the speed of these monsters is too fast. Sif was just confused for 3 seconds, and they seemed to be much closer. The sound of rumbling became louder and louder. When Sif jumped from the roof, everyone had already seen the billowing smoke and the thunder that was revealed in the smoke. What is that? Hogan asked hurriedly. Sif shook her head and said, I can't see clearly, there is too much smoke and dust, but they seem to have a lot of thunder on them. After hearing Sif's words, the faces of the 3 Asgard warriors showed a look of solemnity. These things are obviously abnormal. It looks like they are here just for a few of them. At this time, in the sky, the roar of helicopter propellers suddenly came. 2 black transport helicopters suddenly appeared and quickly headed towards the town. The appearance of 2 helicopters shocked the 4 people even more. They have never seen a flight machine with this shape. Less than a minute, the 2 helicopters slowly landed on the streets of the town. And the figures in the smoke gradually emerged. When Sif and others saw the appearance of the thunder liquor, their eyes widened with disbelief on their faces. Although the appearance of thunder liquor has changed a lot compared to before. But, overall, it's still pretty scary. Their bodies are still dark red, and their skinless flesh and blood tissue is still exposed. The ferocious bone spurs on their bodies, like sharp daggers, grow on their bodies and actually reflect the luster of metal under the sun. That's not the scariest thing. Instead, those monsters were actually flashing with silver lightning. On the skeletal armor on their bodies, there are actually silver lines that look like lightning. In those lines, endless thunder is faintly flashing. And, on their limbs, thunder is also flashing. After these monsters approached the town, they quickly divided into 2 teams and ran towards both sides. In just 10 seconds, a huge amount of encirclement was formed, surrounding the entire town. And, after surrounding the entire town, these monsters began to move forward slowly, gradually shrinking the size of the encirclement. It seems that these monsters are well trained and even more organized than the ranks of Asgard soldiers. Simply incredible. Unconsciously, the 4 of them had taken out their own weapons. This situation is already very obvious. These monsters, as well as the 2 flight machines, should be coming for me. They had heard news about Earth many times before when they were in Asgard. However, those messages have always said that people on Earth are weak and there are no powerful creatures, but what I see in front of me is completely different from what is described in those messages. Could it be that it was teleported to the wrong place? The 4 of them were a little confused, but at the same time they were quite nervous. After all, Thor was not here, so it seemed that it would not be an easy task for them to deal with those vicious-looking monsters. At this moment, the rear compartment doors of the 2 transport helicopters also slowly opened. 2 teams of heavily armed Umbrella Company soldiers wearing black combat uniforms stepped off the helicopter. Those guys all had cold faces and held a weapon in their hands that they couldn't recognize. On their combat uniforms, they all have the same logo, which is a black and white umbrella pattern. The team gathered under the helicopter, and then, a tall human with sunglasses led the team towards the 4 of them. At the same time, the surrounding monsters also came to the vicinity of the 4 of them, surrounding them. These monsters paid no attention to the ordinary town residents. Instead, they only surrounded 4 people. This is already obvious. Their goal is themselves. The faces of Sif and the 3 Asgard warriors became more solemn. This situation was something they had not thought of before coming here. At this moment, Wesker led his armed team and had arrived in front of the 4 people. Wesker held the submachine gun in his hand and said coldly, "Roll up your sleeves and stand in a row against the wall." Wesker's words directly confused the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif. It feels like my personality has been insulted. Moreover, the other party actually wanted to draw his own blood. Are you kidding? I am one of the 3 Asgard warriors of Asgard, the most powerful warrior under Thor. This group of Earthlings dared to talk so shamelessly when they met for the first time. They were looking for death. Among the 3 warriors of Asgard, Volstagg, who had the hottest temper, was the first to get angry. He took 2 steps forward and came to Wesker. The axe in his hand was even raised to Wesker's chest. The meaning of provocation is quite obvious. Even in Asgard, few would dare speak to him like this. I didn't expect that this little earthling would be so arrogant. But what he didn't expect was that the small human in front of him slowly took a few steps back. It seemed that he was frightened by his own momentum. Wrong, not scared. A smile actually appeared on the other party's face. There was a strong sense of ridicule in that smile. What's the situation? Court death. Behind Volstagg, the other three people crossed their arms and watched all this with cold expressions, not preparing to take action. In their opinion, Volstagg alone is enough to resolve the battle. After all, in their impression, the human body is quite fragile. But the little human in front of them took a few steps back again. Then he raised one of his hands and made a strange gesture. Immediately afterwards, in the circle surrounded by monsters on the outside, 4 monsters suddenly walked out. Those 4 monsters were just ordinary members of the army of monsters around them. But after they walked out of the army, they began to rush towards the 4 of them. They were actually preparing to use these monsters to fight the 4 of them. In an instant, the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif took up fighting stances. But the 4 of them were not too nervous. If those tens of thousands of monsters charge at them at the same time, they may need to be really cautious. However, if there are only 4, one for each person, there is really no need to be too nervous. However, what surprised them was that when the monsters rushed towards them, they discovered that the speed of those monsters was surprisingly fast. Although when they came before, in the smoke and dust, these monsters were also very fast. But the feeling of close contact is not the same as now. At the moment, it only took 2 or 3 seconds from the time the 4 monsters started running to when they arrived in front of the 4 people. When the 4 raised their weapons, the 4 Thunderlickers jumped up. Their 4 paws suddenly erupted with intense silver light. In an instant, they grabbed the bodies of 4 people. At this time, Sif and the others finally turned serious. Because the other party's speed is really too fast. The running speed is fast and the claws attack even faster. In an instant, each of them faced the claws of the monster in front of them. Silver light flashes. In an instant, the 4 of them understood the horror of these monsters. Although the weapons in their hands were blocked in the attack path of those claws, they seemed to have blocked the attacks of those monsters. However, they suddenly felt that violent lightning burst out from those claws. The lightning quickly spread throughout his body along with the weapon in his hand. In an instant, the 4 of them felt at the same time that their bodies seemed to be paralyzed by electricity. Those lightning flashes traveled all over his body in an instant. Although it was not fatal, it also made the bodies of the 4 people numb. It was like being electrocuted. Wrong. It's like being electrocuted by Thor's thunder power. This feeling is very familiar. They used to be with Thor every day, whether fighting or playing, so they often accidentally touched Thor's thunder power. That feeling is exactly the same as now. But how could a monster on Earth have the same thunder power as Thor? Countless thoughts flashed through the minds of the 4 of them instantly. But it was only for a moment. Because, just when their bodies suddenly became a little numb, the attacks of those monsters did not stop. 4 monsters pounced on Sif and the 3 Asgard warriors again at the same time. But this time, it's not as simple as the first time. Their bodies, under the influence of those thunder powers, had obviously become much stiffer. 4 people were attacked by 4 monsters at the same time. And, on the claws of the 4 Thunderlickers, there are countless thunder and lightnings that continue to pour into the bodies of the 4 people. They didn't expect that they would be defeated so quickly. At the moment, the scene on the battlefield is quite uniform. 4 warriors from Asgard were all lying on the ground. On their chests, there was a Thunderlicker's claw stepping on it. The 4 Thunderlickers were staring closely at the prey in front of them with their ugly faces. The disgusting mucus flowing out of their mouths also dripped on the chests of the 4 of them. The 4 Thunderlickers are like 4 victors, declaring their victory. This scene, even Wesker, who had expected it for a long time, did not expect it at all. He had seen these Thunderlickers when he was at the Hive base. However, I never expected that their real fighting power would be so strong. Especially with Wesker's eyesight, he could clearly see that when the 4 weirdly dressed guys took action, they were obviously extremely fast and extremely powerful. If he were to fight them with cold weapons, he would definitely not be a single enemy. But such a powerful warrior is no match for those Thunder Lickers. What's even scarier is, the Thunder Lickers don't act alone. In the secret underground base of the Umbrella Company hive, those Lickers are in units of hundreds of thousands. Moreover, as a high-level executive of the hive base, Wesker also knew that the cloning laboratory's clone organism cultivation chamber seemed to be expanding on a large scale. If all those biological cultivation chambers were used to create such terrifying monsters, then the Umbrella Company would probably never have enemies in this world again. The more he thought about it, the more excited Wesker became. As the veteran of Umbrella Company and the most loyal subordinate of Lin Yu, the boss of Umbrella Company, it is indeed a joy to see Umbrella becoming stronger and stronger. And at the moment, on the ground, Sif and the 3 Asgard warriors seemed to have finally given in. Is it too late to roll up your sleeves now? Fandral with a mustache among the 3 Asgard warriors asked weakly. Chapter 31. New York. A shield helicopter slowly took off. Sitting on the plane were a smiling Barton and a slightly excited Thor. After Barton told Thor what happened in the small town in southern New York, he seemed a little excited. After all, being able to see your closest partner when you are at your lowest is indeed something worth being excited about. A few minutes later, the helicopter slowly appeared not far from the town. And at the moment, Barton and Thor's expressions were a little ugly. Because, from the helicopter, they could clearly see the situation in the town. At the moment, the entire town was surrounded by a group of ugly monsters. In that encirclement, Sif and the 3 Asgard warriors could be faintly seen. At the moment, they were rolling up their sleeves, lining up, and standing neatly by the wall of a private house. Beside them, a heavily armed man in black was stabbing their arms with something. Thor was familiar with this scene. I was treated like this when I failed to pick up my Mjolnir and was in a bad mood. But at that time, I was almost despairing, so I didn't resist at all. However, Sif and the 3 Asgard warriors did not seem to do so voluntarily. Those monsters surrounded the entire ground with water. And at the moment, Wesker, who was inserting needles into the arms of 3 people, suddenly raised his head and glanced coldly at the helicopter of the Bureau of Depth. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. It seems that there is no surprise at all about the arrival of S.H.I.E.L.D. When S.H.I.E.L.D.'s helicopter just took off, he had already received the message from headquarters. And, Lin Yu has also given him an order not to fight with S.H.I.E.L.D. people when he sees them. After all, Lin Yu and Nick Fury had just met, and they had a happy chat. Therefore, there is no need to make the relationship between the 2 parties so tense now. At this moment, Hogun, one of the 3 warriors of Asgard, also saw the sudden arrival of the helicopter. At the same time, Thor was also seen on top of a helicopter. Instantly he shouted excitedly, Thor, we are here, come and save us quickly." Although they didn't suffer much harm at the hands of the people from the Umbrella Company, the feeling of being caught and having their blood drawn was really terrible. Their dignity and honor as Asgard's elite warriors were about to be lost. They were naturally quite excited to see Thor. The other 3 people also shouted loudly in a hurry. But, what surprised them was, Thor's reaction was a bit strange. At the moment, on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicopter, Thor looked at the Thunder Lickers on the ground with a solemn expression. Of course he knows these monsters. However, the appearance of these monsters has changed a lot compared to before. Especially, he actually saw thunder in those monsters. Those silver thunders looked quite familiar to Thor. Why does it seem to be somewhat similar to my own thunder power? Although the power of thunder looks the same as other lightning in nature, as Thor can still see some small differences. In addition to these, he naturally also thought of the voice that talked to him through the device on the monster that day. If you want to regain your divine power, you can't use brute force. What exactly is the heart of a king? The 3 Asgard warriors and Sif were still shouting. But on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicopter, Thor didn't seem to hear it. He seemed to be thinking about something. It seems like he is afraid of something. The shouts of the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif gradually became weaker. In front of them, Wesker said coldly, "Stop shouting, I will let you go after the blood is drawn honestly." After saying that, Wesker plunged the syringe into Sif's arm. Although she is a girl, she is a warrior of Asgard after all, so she will not scream like a little girl on Earth when she gets a needle. Only, Her eyes never left Thor on the helicopter. What she was really worried about was Thor's current state. Could it be that this little blow made Thor, the god of thunder, become decadent? Or did Thor encounter something strange on Earth? Thor's current appearance made Sif confused. However, Wesker never stopped. In less than a minute, 4 tubes of blood were put into the package that Wesker carried with him. He turned around and looked at the shield helicopter that was still hovering in the sky but did not dare to land. Then he led his team and quickly evacuated to the Umbrella Company's transport helicopter. 2 huge transport helicopters slowly took off. Howling, it flew past Shield's helicopter and gradually disappeared into the sky. His mission is to get these 4 tubes of blood. Now that the mission is completed, he needs to go back and resume his life immediately. However, this time, just as Shield's helicopter was preparing to land, 20,000 Thunderlickers were also preparing to retreat under the control of Lin Yu. In the sky, a dazzling colorful light suddenly appeared, falling from the sky. It landed directly in the center of the town, in front of the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif. The colorful light pillar slowly dissipated, revealing the huge figure inside. Asgard's strongest guard, the destruction mecha, comes to Earth. At the moment, Asgard, Loki sat on the throne that originally belonged to Odin, with the corners of his mouth raised. Through the destroyer armor, Loki can see everything the destroyer armor sees. It was almost as if he were there in person. So, when the light dissipated, Loki saw everything on the scene. The corners of his raised mouth suddenly froze on his face. What's the situation? Loki suddenly stood up from his throne. The place where I teleported should be correct. This is where Thor and the 3 warriors of Asgard descended. But why are there so many monsters here? And he actually teleported the destroyer mecha into a circle surrounded by monsters. Loki was confused. However, when he turned the head of the destroyer mecha and saw the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif, who were also confused, and Thor sitting on a strange flight machine, he was relieved. Since your goals are all here, that's enough. The head of the destroyer mecha suddenly shapeshifted, and a huge amount of muzzle appeared. Fierce flames brewed rapidly inside. While everyone was still in a state of confusion, the destroyer mecha had already taken action under Loki's control. Once launched, it is the most powerful energy beam attack. This attack method is quite powerful. It is also one of the most powerful methods of the destroyer mecha. When they saw the destroyer mecha's head begin to shapeshift, the expressions of the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif changed drastically. As Asgard warriors, how could they not know what this meant? What they didn't expect was that the destroyer mecha was ready to attack them as soon as it arrived on Earth. Although they were confused, they were not slow at all in their actions. When the energy beam on the destroyer's head just appeared, the 4 of them hid to the side at the same time. Although he was very embarrassed, he managed to avoid the attack of the energy beam. But the attack of the destroyer mecha affected the surrounding Thunderlickers. Although the Thunderlickers are very fast, they stand too crowded after all. There was no room for them to dodge. Moreover, Lin Yu, who was controlling the Thunderlicker, was slightly distracted at this time. Because when I saw the destroyer mecha with my own eyes, compared to what I saw on TV in my previous life, the difference was very obvious. It looks more powerful than in the movie. At the moment, under the attack of the destruction beam, several Thunderlickers were knocked away, and Lin Yu came back to his senses. Suddenly, his brows wrinkled. This guy Loki is really hateful. How dare you attack your own Thunderlicker? Although the main targets of the attack just now were the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif, they did not take into account that their Thunderlicker was right next to them. He didn't take his 20,000 Thunderlickers seriously at all. Simply looking for death. Lin Yu's mind suddenly sank into his consciousness, and he slowly closed his eyes. Since Loki attacked him first, it was time to test the strength of his group of Thunderlickers. Ever since the Thunderlickers were cloned, they have yet to fully unleash their power. This time, the destroyer mecha is here, so it's time to give it a try. Lin Yu closed his eyes and smiled slightly. 20,000 Thunderlickers rushed towards the destroyer mecha at the same time. At the same time, just when the destroyer mecha attacked for the first time, Thor couldn't sit still on the shield helicopter. He knows the power of the destroyer mecha best. The destroyer mecha has not participated in the war for a long time. It has been placed in the treasure house of Asgard's palace, guarding Asgard's many treasures. Unexpectedly, it appeared here. As expected, it must be controlled by his good brother, Loki. Thor was on the helicopter and jumped off. Although he now lost his divine power, his body was still very strong. In addition, the helicopter was not too high from the ground, so he landed firmly on the ground. Then, Thor hurriedly ran towards his companion. At this moment, he realized that in his heart, the life of his partner was more important than anything else. Just as Thor jumped out of the helicopter, Barton has also been in contact with S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury. He stared blankly at everything in front of him. Whether it was the Thunderlicker or the Destroyer mecha, these things were beyond the scope of his knowledge. After the call was connected, Barton reported weakly, "Director, the situation here seems a bit special." Barton didn't even know how to describe it. On one side were 20,000 ugly monsters, on the other side were mechas that looked full of science fiction, and on the other side was a strange combination that looked like they were filming a costume drama. Barton felt like today was like a dream. In this kind of battle, I still seem to be unable to intervene. After all, he only has one bow and arrow. Moreover, it seems that whether his bow and arrows hit the mecha or those monsters, they have no big effect. At this time, Nick Fury's voice also came from the phone. "I've seen it all." Nick Fury was also a little helpless. Nick Fury has seen the scene in the town through S.H.I.E.L.D.'s satellite. After all, such a big scene can be seen clearly even through satellites. At this moment, Barton asked weakly again, "Director, do we want to take action?" In the following battle, Barton really doesn't know who to help. Among these three parties, he couldn't tell who was the enemy and who was the friend. On the other side of the phone, Nick Fury hesitated for a few seconds, seemed to be a little confused, and then said slowly, "Forget it, you should just watch over there." Loki also didn't expect that the monsters' counterattack would come so quickly. When they saw the powerful destroyer mecha, they all pounced on it without any hesitation. 20,000 Thunderlickers, with silver lightning flashing on their bodies, frantically pounced on the destroyer mecha. Although the destroyer mecha is very powerful, its sensitivity is far inferior to that of these Thunderlickers. In an instant, Loki's vision turned pitch black. 20,000 Thunderlickers swamped the destroyer. Their claws and teeth were biting crazily on the destroyer mecha. The powerful power of thunder also began to penetrate the exterior of the destroyer mecha and penetrate into his body. But, compared with the hard metal of the destroyer mecha, the claws of these Thunderlickers are obviously slightly inferior in hardness. But these Thunderlickers have no idea what pain is. Even if their claws are broken, it does not affect their madness at all. At this moment, the light on the destroyer mecha lit up again. Powerful energy beams exploded on countless Thunderlickers. But, the defense of these Thunderlickers is not bad either. Their bodies are all covered with hard bone armor. The beam of energy hitting the armor on the Thunderlicker could only shatter the armor at best, but it could not directly penetrate the skeletal armor and hit the Thunderlicker's body directly. Definitely, even if he hits the body of the Thunderlickers, even if he kills these Thunderlickers, Lin Yu doesn't feel any pain at all. There are more Thunderlickers in the hive's secret base. Moreover, as long as the corpses of the dead Thunderlickers are recovered, they will become alive again in less than 2 days. This is the greatest advantage of these biochemical creatures. Because they are clone products, and the Umbrella Company's strongest technology is cloning. As long as you have the raw materials, you can copy these terrifying monsters infinitely. The battle between the Thunderlicker and the Destruction Mecha continues. And it looks like it won't be finished in a while. At this time, Thor had already arrived beside his teammates. Although the destroyer's first energy beam attack just now did not directly hit the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif, the aftermath of the explosion also affected the 3 of them to some extent. They all had minor injuries of varying degrees. Their bodies are more fragile than Thunderlickers, which are covered in skeletal armor and have integrated the Abomination and Thor genes. Thor came to the 4 of them and nervously inspected the bodies of his companions. At the moment, the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif did not care about their injuries, but looked at their closest friend, Thor, excitedly. The fighting on the side is still going on. From time to time, when surrounded by Thunderlickers, terrifying energy beams would occasionally be shot out. The aftermath of those energy beams was powerful enough to flatten the surrounding houses. At this moment, the aftermath of a beam of light came towards everyone in Asgard. Somewhat coincidental, but it was just the aftermath, and its power was not something that the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif could withstand. Definitely, even Thor can't handle it now. But at this moment, Thor stepped forward without any hesitation and stood in front of his teammates. This scene immediately shocked the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif behind him. They have seen the power of the destroyer mecha, and if it is hit, Thor will never be able to withstand it. Especially now that he has lost his divine power and his defense has become too weak. But when they anxiously tried to push Thor away, it was already too late. The aftermath of that energy beam has arrived in front of Thor. Boom! A violent explosion sounded in Thor's chest. His body was blown away like a kite with its string broken. A burnt black color suddenly appeared on his chest. After resisting this attack, Thor's consciousness instantly fell into darkness. Only, under his protection, the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif were not harmed. At the moment, the battle between the destroyer mecha and the thunder licker continues. Although every time the destroyer mecha releases an energy beam, it can knock away dozens or even hundreds of thunder lickers. But compared to the huge number of 20,000, these dozens are nothing at all. Moreover, even if they are knocked away, those thunder lickers will turn over on the ground and join the battlefield again. They are completely fearless. Ever since the battle began, nothing else had appeared in Loki's sight. His eyes were all occupied by these terrifying monsters. And, as the battle progresses, Loki was horrified to find that there were some small scratches on the body of the destroyer mecha. Those monsters actually left traces on the destroyer mecha. Although it was only a very small and shallow mark, it also frightened Loki. After all, there are too many monsters, and there is no way for me to kill them completely. However, the scratches on the destroyer mecha will constantly expand as the battle continues. If you continue to fight these monsters, it is estimated that the destroyer armor will be scrapped sooner or later. And the most important thing is that under the crazy attack and siege of these monsters, he can't even find Thor anywhere. Not to mention attacking Thor and the 3 warriors of Asgard. There is no way to achieve your goal. Loki was completely panicked. At the same time, Raccoon City, in the secret base of the Umbrella Company hive. A smile suddenly appeared on Lin Yu's face. The destroyer armor is indeed very strong, but as long as you control the thunder licker to concentrate the power of thunder on its claws, and under constant attack, you can still cause damage to the destroyer mecha. Moreover, so far, the number of deaths of thunder lickers is only in single digits. If you keep spending it, you will definitely win. But at this time, through the screen in front of him and the perception of the thunder licker, Lin Yu suddenly discovered that a small black dot suddenly appeared in the sky. The little black dot quickly flew towards the town. The speed was so fast that it caused a sonic boom. Although I can't see clearly what the small black dot is on the satellite image in front of me. However, as a time traveler who is familiar with Marvel plots, Lin Yu immediately thought of what that thing was. Unexpectedly, his appearance changed the plot of Marvel, and Thor still rediscovered his divine power in this small town. And that small dot in the sky that is flying rapidly is Thor's Mjolnir. Thor, who stood up for his comrades and blocked the attack of the destroyer mech with his body, finally gained Mjolnir's recognition again. And his divine power returned to his body. At this moment, in the Umbrella Company's hive underground base, Lin Yu looked at the picture on the screen in front of him, then smiled slightly and gave the last order to the Licker army. Everyone, retreat. The purpose of going to that town this time was just to obtain the genes of the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif. Wesker was already on his way back with 4 tubes of blood. The main goal has been basically achieved. Lin Yu just wanted to test the specific combat effectiveness of the current Thunder Licker when attacking the Destroyer Mecha. Now, the Destroyer Mecha has been attacked by the Thunder Licker, and has serious scratches on its body. This already shows the strength of his Thunder Licker. If you continue to fight, the victor will definitely be the Thunder Licker army. This is enough. So, there was no need for the Licker army to stay there any longer. After Lin Yu's order was issued, the Licker army retreated as quickly as the tide. When he left, he didn't forget to swallow the corpses of the dead Thunder Lickers again. In a matter of seconds, 20,000 Thunder Lickers retreated completely. Except for the footprints of the Thunder Lickers that can be seen on the ground, nothing else is left. The army roared and ran towards the direction from which it came. And at the moment, Loki, controlling the destroyer mecha, finally saw the light outside again. A long-lost smile also appeared on his face. Those monsters are gone, and now I can finally teach this arrogant Thor a lesson. Loki controlled the destroyer mecha, which was covered in scratches, and looked around, trying to find any trace of Thor. But, the moment he raised his head while controlling the destroyer mecha, a hammer suddenly magnified in front of his eyes. At the moment, Thor actually regained control of the power of thunder, and the hammer was thrown from Thor's hand. With a whistling sound, Mjolnir flew rapidly towards the destroyer mecha that had not yet recovered its consciousness. Boom! The violent explosion resounded throughout the town. When Mjolnir touched the destroyer mecha, he exploded with terrifying power. Under normal circumstances, the destroyer mecha is still very hard. It is impossible for Mjolnir to do anything to the destroyer mecha with just one attack. But, the scene in front of them surprised everyone. Under Mjolnir's attack, the destroyer mecha actually had several cracks on its body. Immediately afterwards, the cracks gradually widened, like a spider web. There was a dazzling light inside those spider webs. Finally, the body of the destroyer mecha emitted a terrifying explosion. It was turned into ashes by Thor's hammer. Mjolnir drew an arc in midair and quickly flew back to Thor's hands. But, at the moment, Thor looked confused. Even the 3 Asgard warriors and Sif behind him were stunned. The destroyer mecha was so vulnerable. There's something wrong with this. The destroyer mecha is Asgard's most powerful combat power. It not only has powerful attack power, but also has extremely high defense. Back then, a destroyer mecha faced the attack of millions of giants of Jotunheim and remained unscathed. And now, it was shattered by Thor's hammer. What a joke. Everyone looked at the debris in front of them in stunned silence, with shock beyond words. And at the moment, Asgard in Asgard, Loki slowly opened his eyes, and his eyes were also full of shock. A sense of absurdity arose spontaneously. Why did the destroyer mecha break into pieces like this? But, compared to Thor and others who were more confused, he was vaguely aware of the problem. Could it be that the wounds left by the claws of those monsters on the destroyer mecha just now made the destroyer mecha so vulnerable? So, what are those monsters? Why have I never heard of such a terrifying monster? Unknowingly, the power of the Thunderlicker has left an indelible impression on Loki's heart. Raccoon City. In the Umbrella Corporation Hive underground base. Lin Yu silently closed the big screen and returned to his soft sofa. Lin Yu had already guessed the outcome of what happened on the battlefield without even looking at it. Thor, who has regained his divine power, and Mjolnir, will have absolutely no problem dealing with the destroyer mecha. What's more, in the battle with the Thunderlicker army just now, many traces had appeared on the destroyer rack. Although those marks are very light, if they are violently attacked again, they are very likely to become fatal injuries. But, at the moment Lin Yu was no longer in the mood to care about what happened in that small town. Because, the door of Lin Yu's office has been knocked. And Alice, already holding 4 test tubes, walked in. In Lin Yu's eyes, the system's text introduction to the genes in the 4 test tubes also appeared. The 4 test tubes contained the genes of the 3 warriors of Asgard and Sif respectively. After Wesker returned to the Umbrella Company's Hive underground base, he immediately handed over 4 tubes of blood to Isaac according to Lin Yu's order. After a brief processing by Isaac, it was then handed over to Alice. At last, through Alice's hand, it was delivered to Lin Yu. Although the process seems a bit complicated, everyone attaches great importance to Lin Yu. Only half an hour had passed from the small town in southern New York to Lin Yu's hands. At the moment, looking at the 4 test tubes in Alice's hand, Lin Yu showed a rather excited smile on his face. With these 4 genes, your biochemical technology tree can finally receive its first trunk upgrade. Gene name: Volstagg gene of the 3 warriors of Asgard. Gene strength: 2 stars. Experience points available: 100 points. Gene contains ability ranking: Strength 50, Special 10, Defense 30, Attack 10 inches. Gene name: Fandral gene of the 3 warriors of Asgard. Gene strength: 2 stars. Experience points available, 80 points. Gene contains ability ranking. Strength 10, Agility 40, Intelligence 10, Defense 10, Attack 10 inches. Gene name, Hogun Gene of the 3 Warriors of Asgard. Gene strength, 2 stars. Experience points available, 120 points. Gene contains ability ranking. Strength 50, Agility 20, Intelligence 30, Defense 10, Attack 10 inches. Gene name, Asgard Shift Gene. Gene strength, 2 stars. Experience points available, 120 points. Gene contains ability ranking. Strength 30, Agility 30, Defense 30, Attack 30 inches. All the genetic data in the 4 test tubes appeared in Lin Yu's sight. Lin Yu hurriedly took the 4 test tubes from Alice's hand. Alice, on the other hand, turned around and left Lin Yu's office, and helped Lin Yu close the office door. After Alice left, Lin Yu's hand suddenly burst out with a familiar light. 4 test tubes disappeared at the same time. At the same time, the biochemical technology tree in Lin Yu's mind also underwent huge amounts of changes in an instant. This time the light was more intense than ever before. Although the total experience points provided by the 4 genes are not as much as what Thor himself gave. But, prior to this, the experience value of the biochemical technology tree's main trunk had reached a critical point. Originally, there was only 20 experience points left to upgrade. Now, 440 experience points are directly obtained. In an instant, the dark blue color representing the experience value scale surpassed the level 2 position of the main body, and then rushed upward again. Several branches also added a large amount of experience. At this moment, the system prompts also sounded in Lin Yu's mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The level of the main trunk of the biochemical technology tree has been upgraded to level 2. The system will reward 1 biochemical cultivation slot and 1 first-generation bionicle warrior hunter. It has been stored in the latest biochemical cultivation slot. Please check it yourself. Please host continue to work hard to obtain more high-quality genes. After the main level reaches level 3, you will get more powerful biochemical warriors. Just when the system prompt sounded, another identical culture tank appeared in Lin Yu's mind next to the biochemical culture tank where the thunder liquor was previously stored. Moreover, a dark green figure also appeared in the culture tank. At the same time, Lin Yu's body was also evolving rapidly. The increase in strength, speed, and slight improvement in intelligence are all rapidly changing Lin Yu's strength. But, all of Lin Yu's attention now has been placed on the monster in his mind. He didn't pay much attention to the changes in his body. Lin Yu's expression moved slightly, and a light flashed on the ground in front of him. A monster with a dark green body and covered with snake-like scales appeared in front of Lin Yu. This monster is slightly smaller than the thunder liquor. But, its shape looks even more terrifying. The liquor looks disgusting, but the hunter looks like a ghost. It looks like a lizard walking upright. However, each of its claws is like a long sickle, extremely sharp. In his previous life, Lin Yu had seen predators in Resident Evil movies and games. But, seeing the hunter in person and seeing it on the screen are completely different things. Although this hunter is only the first generation, you can tell how powerful it is just by looking at it. And, the abilities of hunters and lickers are completely different. If the lickers are like a group of crazy monsters, then the hunters are the cold assassins in the shadows. They are real hunters. Any prey they target will eventually be torn into pieces. In addition to these, Lin Yu also noticed that the eyes of this first-generation hunter seemed to be somewhat different from those of the licker. Its eyes are completely different from those of ordinary animals. Kind of like the eyes of a chameleon. The eyelids are very thick, protrude outside the eye sockets, and can rotate 180 degrees respectively. This means that there will be no blind spots in the sight of the hunter. All of this seems to be in service of hunting. After admiring the first-generation hunter he had just obtained for a while, Lin Yu took the hunter back into the biochemical cultivation tank in his mind. Then, he stood up and walked out of his office. Now that we have such a powerful guy, let's turn it into an army. The hunter-killer army sounds extremely terrifying. In Lin Yu's heart, she was quite grateful for her time travel. My own time travel identity works perfectly with Goldfinger. Perfect. At the moment, Alice was already waiting quietly outside Lin Yu's office door. Seeing Alice, Lin Yu smiled slightly and took Alice towards the direction of the cloning laboratory. A few minutes later, Lin Yu and Alice appeared in the cloning laboratory of the Hive underground base. At the moment, the cloning laboratory is still undergoing renovation and expansion. Countless construction workers are busy working nervously. Since the order was given directly by Lin Yu, no one dared to be lazy. Even Dr. Isaac, the head of the cloning laboratory, would take time out of his spare time to supervise the progress of the project. When Lin Yu and Alice arrived, they happened to see Dr. Isaac shouting there. "Cheer up and speed up. If anyone is lazy and I see him, he will be locked up in the laboratory today." Isaac spat out the stars. An arrogant look. However, no one dared to contradict him. Although the leader of the engineering team has a high status in the umbrella company, he is far inferior to Isaac, the popular figure in front of the boss. But, when he felt the movement behind him and turned around, Isaac's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly showed a flattering smile. "Boss, why are you here?" Isaac bowed and greeted with a playful smile. For Isaac, Lin Yu was really helpless. But, his work ability is still worthy of recognition. As long as you are loyal to yourself, other shortcomings don't matter to Lin Yu. How many biological culture tanks have been completed in the cloning laboratory? Lin Yu asked slowly, holding his hands behind his back. What Lin Yu is most concerned about is the biological culture tank. Because the biological culture tank determines the upper limit of the clone size. Everything else, including raw materials, etc., are just the basis. Isaac hurriedly replied, "Boss, there are 100,000 pieces that have been completed and can be put into use. Adding the original 100,000 pieces, the total is 200,000. When talking about this achievement, Isaac suddenly puffed up his chest. Being able to complete the construction of 100,000 biological culture tanks in such a fast time has a lot to do with his supervision. Lin Yu is also very satisfied with the result. He nodded slowly and said, "Okay, very good, come with me." Lin Yu praised him casually, and Isaac was as happy as if he had won a grand prize. Lin Yu, on the other hand, took Alice and Isaac to a conference room in the cloning laboratory. In front of Lin Yu, a light flashed, and the figure of the first-generation hunter appeared in front of the three of them. Alice and Isaac were slightly stunned at the same time. They had already seen Lin Yu's magical ability, but this hunter still gave them a big shock. The image of the hunter is indeed a bit scary. The dark green scales exuded a cold and dark aura, and the pair of protruding small eyes looked strange and unusual. Especially their sharp claws, they look like a complete killing machine. "Boss, this thing is so beautiful." Isaac's face suddenly lit up with excitement. He even leaned down and touched the hunter's body. This guy will become like this when he sees a powerful creature. He likes to study those powerful genes the most. Seeing the hunter was like seeing a beautiful woman, his eyes lit up. Lin Yu was already used to this. He smiled slightly and said, "Keep a copy of its genes and clone 100,000 of them." After hearing Lin Yu's order, Isaac hurriedly and excitedly agreed, "Okay, boss." After the events of Thor, peace seems to have returned to the Marvel world. After destroying the destroyer mech controlled by Loki, Thor returned to Asgard with the three Asgard warriors and Sif. Lin Yu didn't bother to care about what happened in Asgard. S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury and Phil Coulson are also secretly investigating everything about Hydra. However, as the investigation deepened, they became more and more frightened. Various cobweb horse traces show that everything the umbrella company boss Lin Yu said seems to be true. And, not just Sitwell, not just Rumlow, Nick Fury was horrified to discover that Hydra has penetrated into every corner of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the more this happened, the less he dared to act rashly. Because, according to the current investigation, if a big cleanup is really carried out, Hydra is even more powerful than S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, except for Nick Fury and his closest subordinates, no one else can believe it. But, with Nick Fury's methods, as long as he knows the clues about Hydra, the solution will be a matter of time. It depends on whether he has the determination to cut off his wrist. Umbrella Company. Lin Yu's life during this period was also extremely boring. After the biochemical technology tree was upgraded to level 2, Lin Yu's body was undergoing huge amounts of changes every day. At the moment, Lin Yu could leave deep punch marks on the metal wall of his room with just one punch. With the powerful power and the blessing of the power of thunder, Lin Yu even felt that he could fight Thor with Mjolnir. This is not a fantasy, but a conclusion reached by Lin Yu through serious comparison. His current physical strength is even stronger than Thor's. However, Thor's weapons are indeed a bit abnormal. During this period of time, Lin Yu has been trying to adapt to his growing body. After a few days of study, I finally got used to it. Strong physical strength makes Lin Yu more confident. Only, these are Lin Yu's deepest secrets. Except for Alice, even the most core subordinates like Isaac and Wesker don't know about his physical condition. In addition, under the order of Lin Yu, Umbrella Corporation's acquisition of shares in Stark Industries has also been ongoing. Tony Stark, CEO of Stark Industries, was kidnapped by terrorists in the Middle East a few days ago. There has been no news until now, causing their stock price to suddenly plummet. It also caused many shareholders to begin selling shares of Stark Industries. Umbrella Corporation took this opportunity to acquire a large number of Stark Industries shares. For a time, Umbrella Company surpassed Stark Industries' original second-largest shareholder Obadiah Stane and became the second-largest shareholder, second only to Tony Stark's shareholding ratio. Regarding the acquisition of Stark Industrial Equity, Alice is reporting the latest progress to Lin Yu every day. This is something Lin Yu cares about very much, so the progress is very fast every day. And this day, sitting in the office, after listening to Alice's report, Lin Yu also showed an unusual smile on his face. "It's time to save Iron Man," Lin Yu said as if talking to himself. "Iron Man?" On the side, Alice asked doubtfully. In his previous life, Lin Yu liked the role of Iron Man. Especially in the last scene, he is wearing steel armor, with 5 infinite gems shining brightly on the back of his hand. That sentence, "I am Iron Man," is the youthful memory of many people. In addition, Lin Yu is also the second largest shareholder of Stark Industries, so Lin Yu is ready to rescue Tony from the cave. Calculating time, he should have almost developed his own Mark Generation steel battle suit. And by taking action at this time, he can not only ensure that he continues to become Iron Man according to the original plot, but also allow Lin Yu and Tony to establish a good relationship. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Lin Yu once thought about a question when he first obtained the first-generation liquor. "I have powerful biochemical warriors. If I get Iron Man's steel battle suit technology, thousands of biochemical armies will all wear steel battle suits. The scene will be quite spectacular. And the main problem is that Tony's steel battle suit allows him to breathe in the universe. My biochemical warriors will eventually leave the Earth. By then, I guess I'll really rely on Tony's steel battle suit skills." Taking precautions is what Lin Yu is planning to do now. Umbrella Company's Hive underground base, in Lin Yu's office. Lin Yu did not explain to Alice what Iron Man was, because it was very complicated to explain something that had not yet appeared. But it won't be long before Alice will understand what Iron Man is. "Alice, arrange for Wesker to lead a team to rescue Tony Stark." Lin Yu arranged. Previously, Lin Yu arranged a satellite to focus on Tony Stark's position. Even when Tony was caught by terrorists, Lin Yu knew it very well. And Lin Yu also knows the exact coordinates of where Tony is being held. Upon hearing Lin Yu's order, Alice hurriedly responded, "Okay, boss." At this time, Lin Yu suddenly said again, "Wait a minute, let him take a first-generation Predator to try the combat effectiveness of these new toys." Since the first generation of Predators appeared, Lin Yu has never sent them out on a mission. This time, although only Wesker's armed team can solve it, Lin Yu still wants to take advantage of this opportunity to test the strength of the hunter. Alice hurriedly followed the order and left. A few minutes later, from a secret above-ground base in Raccoon City of the Umbrella Company, a large transport plane took off. This time, no helicopter was used. After all, the distance was quite far. According to Lin Yu's estimation, Wesker and his team can reach the place where Tony Stark is being held in 5 hours at most. The Middle East, in a barren mountain. Here, there is a terrorist group hidden. It was these terrorists, under the instruction of Obadiah Stane, the former second largest shareholder of Stark Industries and an old friend of Tony's father Edward, who captured Tony Stark, who was demonstrating new weapons to the United States military nearby. When Tony was captured, Tony was hit by shrapnel in the chest due to a fight between terrorists and the United States military. Tony, who was supposed to die, was saved by Ethan, a scientist who was also imprisoned by terrorists. Since then, both men have been imprisoned in a cave at a terrorist base. And the purpose of those terrorists is to get Tony to help them make bombs. But Tony never intended to help them build a bomb. He has been using bomb making as a cover to create a steel armor for himself. If this armor is successfully built, then he can put on the armor and escape from this terrorist base. And at the moment, the production of steel armor has come to an end. In other words, it is almost completed. At this time, the patience of the terrorists is getting less and less. Finally, the activation of the armor is the last step left. Tony and Ethan looked at each other, with a hint of determination in their eyes. The two of them were in the cave and blocked the door with heavy objects. Then, the final activation of the armor began. A few minutes later, the terrorist who was suddenly unable to open the door of the cave where Tony were imprisoned finally discovered something unusual. They reported to their leader, Raza. Raza, the bald leader, finally understood that the reason why Tony was holding him back was not because the missiles were difficult to make, but because he was simply being careful. "Break the door open for me, I'm going to kill them," Raza roared angrily. The boys hurriedly took the AK-47s in their hands and ran towards the cave where Tony and the two were imprisoned. And the leader Raza followed closely behind. But just when Raza was walking towards the cave with a few younger brothers, in a dark corner of the base, a dark green figure flashed away. That figure was extremely fast and always moving in the shadows. It seemed like a ghost. A terrorist standing guard seemed to see the fleeting shadow, but the shadow suddenly disappeared. He rubbed his eyes, feeling as if he was dazzled. Looking at that corner again, I can't see anything anymore. The terrorist scratched the top of his head in confusion, feeling a little strange. However, at this moment, out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw that the arm he had raised to scratch his head had fallen from his body. How could the arm fall off? Don't the arms grow on your body? Why did it slip off the body? These thoughts just crossed his mind. Then, in his eyes, the world began to spin. His head also slipped from his body. Immediately afterwards, there was darkness in the man's sight. A headless corpse slowly lay on the ground. There is an extremely smooth section on his neck and arms. Whether it was bones or muscles, they were all cut off neatly without making a sound. After the man's body fell, a dark green shadow quickly disappeared from behind him. Hidden into darkness again, on a high ground 2 kilometers away from the terrorist base, Wesker, with his team, was lying on the ground, waiting. They landed far away and came here on foot. However, they are not ready to take action. Because, before coming out, Alice specifically reminded them to let the Umbrella Company's latest biochemical weapon appear first to test its strength. Wesker can only obey the boss's orders absolutely. Although his hands were itchy and he wanted to have a good fight, Wesker could only lie on the top of the hill, holding a telescope in his hand and looking at the terrorist base in the distance. But when the first-generation hunter entered combat mode and suddenly accelerated, his eyes suddenly widened. His expression was full of shock. Because, even if he holds a telescope and concentrates, he can't keep up with the speed of the hunter. It's like a ghost, appearing and disappearing. One moment it appears on the left, and the next moment it appears on the right. And, occasionally, when I can see its figure, it disappears in a flash. The speed is so fast that only an afterimage can be seen. Until the first corpse appeared in the terrorist base, Wesker couldn't help but curse. When he saw the hunter for the first time, he thought this thing should be terrifying. But I didn't expect it to be so terrifying. This thing kills people as easily as eating and drinking. And, in this short period of time, more than a dozen people had died in that base just by what I saw. Their bodies were lying on the ground, covered in blood. But there was still no gunshot or any shout. It seems that everyone who sees the shadow of the hunter has turned into a corpse. The hunter is like a ghost in the shadows, appearing and disappearing, taking away a life every time it appears. Wesker felt that even if he led the most elite team of the Umbrella Company, they would be no match for such a monster. Definitely, not only himself, not even the most elite Special Forces team of the United States military, or the elite agent team of S.H.I.E.L.D. are definitely no match for it. This biochemical monster was born solely for hunting. Next to Wesker, a soldier heard his boss's voice and hurriedly came over and asked, "Boss, what's wrong?" He thought there was something wrong over there. But Wesker suddenly handed over the telescope in his hand. The soldier took the telescope and looked towards the terrorist base. When he saw this, he was suddenly shocked. He was also stunned. Because the hunter had just passed less than half a minute. There is at least 2 kilometers away from my location. According to his speculation, even if the hunter was very fast, he might have just arrived there. It might not even be there yet. But, through the telescope, he saw that the terrorist base ahead was full of corpses. They were lying all over the floor. Blood has dyed the outside of the entire base red. Then, the soldier handed the telescope in his hand to another armed soldier of the Umbrella Company next to him. However, these warriors are not very educated and can only describe their mood. If it were Lin Yu, he would definitely say, "Awesome," instead of such low-end words. In a terrorist base. The entrance to the cave. Several boys were banging against the door of the cave. However, it seems to be very strong inside and cannot be broken open at all. Raza, the terrorist leader standing behind, was filled with anger and shouted loudly, "Come here with a few more people and blow him up with bombs." But, 2 seconds later, Raza suddenly frowned slightly. "How do you feel? A little quiet?" Except for the boys in front who were still banging against the door hard. After he finished speaking, there was no movement from behind. "Where are the 2 guys standing guard at the door? If I speak so loudly, even if the group of people outside are chatting, they should be able to hear it." Raza turned around in confusion and looked behind him. Suddenly, my whole body trembled suddenly. Everything he could see was filled with blood. No wonder I shouted, but there was no response from outside, not even a sound. It turned out that all the men outside had turned into cold corpses. And, the scariest thing is, those corpses are all headless corpses. All of them died with their heads chopped off. Their heads are right next to their bodies. Great fear suddenly arose in Raza's heart. In his own base, all his men were beheaded silently. This was simply shocking. Raza felt that his heart was about to stop. As a murderous terrorist, he was actually frightened by corpses. But, at this moment, just when Raza looked at the corpse outside, he was extremely frightened, but he didn't make any move yet. He suddenly felt that it suddenly became quiet behind him. Just now, the few boys who were still banging against the cave door suddenly became silent. Raza suddenly felt a chill rush from his tailbone to his forehead. His body couldn't help but shudder again. Then, he slowly turned around and looked at the entrance of the cave. Really, there was blood everywhere, and there were several headless corpses. Among them, a head was rolling slowly on the ground. Rolled to his feet. The appearance of that head was very familiar to him. It was one of his most trusted younger brothers. Raza, the leader of the terrorists, was completely frightened. But, at this moment, the door of the cave was suddenly opened inside. A figure covered in metal armor appeared at the entrance of the cave. He raised one of his hands, as if there was some kind of weapon on that metal arm. But, the weapon did not fire. Because, when the metal figure appeared and saw everything in front of him, he was also stunned on the spot. Tony originally wanted to shout loudly to give himself some momentum. But, when the door of the cave was opened and he saw everything in front of him, he stood stunned on the spot. My mind goes blank. In his sight, countless headless corpses were lying on the ground. Blood was everywhere. There was even a sticky feeling under his feet. You don't need to think about it to know that you have stepped into a puddle of blood. Tony was dumbfounded. I wanted to go crazy and show how powerful the steel battle suit I had just made was, but unexpectedly, all the enemies died tragically. What's happening here? What could have caused this hell-like horrific scene in front of me? A chill suddenly rose in Tony's heart. Immediately afterwards, he saw a picture that frightened him even more. In front of him, there was only one person standing there. Tony was familiar with that person. He should be the leader of these terrorists. Making bombs here is what he has been arranging. But, at the moment, Behind the terrorist leader, a dark green shadow suddenly appeared. Like a monster crawling out of the abyss. Dark and cold. The monster's body was covered with dark green scales, and its body looked like an upright lizard. The claws on its two front paws were as sharp as sickles. When the monster appeared behind Raza, there was a sudden pause. Then, as if deliberately slowing down, he gently raised one of his paws. In Tony Stark's eyes, the claw slowly scratched the terrorist leader's neck. Laugh. A small sound sounded, and if it weren't for the silence in the cave, Tony wouldn't even be able to hear the small sound. Immediately afterwards, Tony saw that extremely scary scene, like watching a horror movie. The head of the terrorist leader slowly slid down from the cross-section of his neck. There was an extremely frightened expression on his face. Tony could even see his eyes still moving on his falling head. At the last moment before his death, he seemed to hear a voice behind him. Just when I was about to turn my head and take a look, my head became separated from my body. At this moment, Tony took a few steps back hastily. But the dark green monster did not move. Its two small eyes looked forward at the same time, staring at Tony coldly. Even through the steel battle suit, Tony Stark could feel the chill coming to his face. Behind Tony Stark, scientist Ethan finally saw the scene in front of him. Compared with Tony, his ability to endure is much weaker in his heart. The moment he saw those corpses and the first-generation hunters, he rolled his eyes and fainted. That terrible scene was something he could bear in his heart. And at the moment, Tony Stark raised his weapon again. On this metal arm, he mounted a flamethrower. Just press the button and fierce flames will appear. But Tony didn't press the button. Just by looking at the appearance of the monster opposite, Tony knew that his simple flamethrower could do nothing to him. With its speed, it can definitely easily dodge its own attacks. And he, wearing this heavy armor and still in a cave, would never be able to withstand the opponent's attack. Tony hesitation repeated, but still did not take the initiative to attack. And the monster didn't attack Tony either. He just stood there, staring at Tony's figure with both eyes. One person and one monster seemed to be facing each other like this. Finally, a few minutes later, a group of heavily armed soldiers came from outside the cave. Tony finally felt more relaxed. Those humans, even if they are not friends, are less psychologically stressed than facing this monster. And Tony, who had sharp eyes, seemed to see a familiar symbol on the clothes of the human team. That's a red and white umbrella logo. Umbrella Company, Tony muttered. Tony Stark is still very familiar with the Umbrella Company. After all, the Umbrella Company is a global monopoly company that is even larger than Stark Industries. Their apparent size is almost dozens of times that of Stark Industries. But why do their people appear here? Then, something happened that shocked Tony even more. After the Umbrella Company's armed team arrived, the terrifying monster slowly retreated and made way for those team members. They are in the same group. Only then did Tony realize that the monsters who killed these terrorists were actually members of the Umbrella Company. The Umbrella Company is actually able to control such a powerful monster. Could it be that they came to save me? At this moment, Wesker had already arrived in front of Tony. He seems to have known Tony Stark's identity for a long time, although Tony is now covered in metal armor and his appearance is completely invisible. Mr. Stark, I am Wesker, the captain of the Umbrella Company's Biochemical Emergency Response Force. I came here to rescue you under the orders of our boss. Please come with me. Wesker grinned, showing his big white teeth and said with a smile. After hearing Wesker's words, Tony finally let out a long breath. Then, he took off the steel mask on his face. No matter what their purpose of saving themselves was, they were finally saved. Outside the cave, a huge transport plane, with fierce flames spraying from below, slowly landed. Wesker made a gentle gesture, and several team members walked out from behind him, directly picked up Ethan who had fainted behind Tony, and carried him onto the plane. And Wesker also made a gesture of invitation to Tony. A few hours later, Raccoon City. Protect the above-ground headquarters building of the Third Company. Tony Stark came to Lin Yu's office under the guidance of Alice. Seeing Tony walking in, Lin Yu immediately showed a smile on his face, stood up and walked over. At the moment, Tony looks a bit beaten up due to being held captive by terrorists for a long time. But The temperament is still very different. He seems to be born with a cool and calm temperament. Even when he met Lin Yu, the owner of the umbrella company whose net worth was dozens of times higher than his own, he didn't show any stage fright at all. The two exchanged pleasantries, and Tony Stark expressed his gratitude to Lin Yu for the rescue. After completing this, the two sat down separately. Lin Yu actually did not invite Tony Stark to meet and chat. It was Tony Stark who took the initiative to meet Lin Yu and express his gratitude in person. But Lin Yu knew that Tony definitely meant more than just thanking himself. For Lin Yu, who is familiar with Marvel plots, it is clear what Tony wants to do most now. Saying that you want to thank yourself in person is just an excuse. He has seen too many tragedies among the terrorists. I also saw the weapons developed by my company being used by terrorists to kill innocent people. Through these experiences, he finally understood that his company had not actually brought healing to the world. On the contrary, it makes the world more cruel. So, what Tony wants to do most now is to stop Stark Industries' weapons production. But he also understands that although he is the CEO of Stark Industrial Group and the largest shareholder, if he wants to stop Stark Industries' core military industry, many people will definitely oppose him. If those shareholders unite, their ideas will definitely not be implemented. And the big boss of Umbrella Company happens to be one of the shareholders of Stark Industries. If you can win the support of the other party, you will be more confident in your decision. Mr. Lin, actually I have one more thing I want to ask you for help with. Tony said a little embarrassed. Lin Yu had just saved himself, and it did seem a bit excessive to ask him for help. But this is something I have to do. So Tony could only bite the bullet and discuss with Lin Yu. Lin Yu smiled slightly and replied, "You said, if you can help me, I will definitely help." Lin Yu thought for a moment and understood what Tony meant. In the plot of the movie, the first thing this guy did after being rescued was to announce at the press conference that Stark Industries was shutting down the military industry. Then now that he has come to find me, his intention is obvious. Before Tony was captured by terrorists, he was already the third largest shareholder of Stark Industries. It would definitely be of great help to him to be on Tony Stark's side. I want to suspend Stark Industries' military industry first. You are the third largest shareholder of Stark Industries, so I want to discuss this matter with you first. Tony said weakly. He himself also knows that the most profitable industry of Stark Industries is the military industry. If it is stopped, all shareholders will probably be affected. It is unlikely that Lin Yu, the boss of the umbrella company, will agree to his decision, but Tony still wants to give it a try. But, to Tony's surprise, Lin Yu smiled slightly and said, "I also think you should stop the military industry first and find out who sold your weapons to terrorists." Hearing Lin Yu's answer, Tony's eyes suddenly lit up. Unexpectedly, the other party agreed so easily. And what surprised him was that Lin Yu actually knew that someone in his company was causing trouble. Indeed, if someone within Stark Industries hadn't sold those weapons to terrorists, those terrorists wouldn't have been able to obtain so many missiles. Or Stark Industries' latest missile. But, at this moment, before Tony could say any words of thanks, Lin Yu smiled again and said, "But." Tony was slightly startled. Hearing the word, "but," I suddenly felt worried. However, I am not the third largest shareholder now, but the second largest shareholder. Lin Yu said with a smile. During this period, Umbrella Corporation, under the orders of Lin Yu, frantically acquired shares of Stark Industries. Lin Yu's shareholding ratio has long surpassed Obadiah Stane, becoming the second largest shareholder. Even Tony Stark's status as the largest shareholder is in danger. Definitely, this should be good news for Tony Stark. Subsequently, Tony Stark chatted with Lin Yu for a while, and the two had a great time. Before Tony left, Lin Yu also gave Tony some news for free. Standing in front of the Umbrella Company headquarters building, and looking about to get on the vehicle arranged by the Umbrella Company, Lin Yu suddenly said softly, "When you go back, be more careful about your elders, such as uncles and so on." Tony Stark was slightly taken aback when he said this. Uncle, elder, it seems that there is only one person who can satisfy these two identities. His father's friend, his elder, the one who calls him uncle, Obadiah Stane. Tony's face changed slightly, and he slowly got into the car without looking back. A few hours later, Lin Yu stood in front of the screen in his office. On the screen in front of him, a live broadcast of Stark Industries' press conference was being played. After the news of Tony Stark's rescue came out, Obadiah Stane immediately organized this press conference. Tony's rescue came as a surprise to him. After all, he was the one who arranged those terrorists. And his order was to have those terrorists kill Tony directly. Unexpectedly, those terrorists are really unreliable. Not only did they not kill Tony, they actually let him escape. Obadiah Stane nearly exploded with rage. But now that Tony is back, we can only make the best use of it. Obadiah Stane wants to use Tony's return to stop the stock price from continuing to fall. But his idea failed. Tony stood on the podium of the press conference with a solemn expression. The first sentence directly detonated the whole audience. I have decided to temporarily close Stark Industries' military industry. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.